Climate justice is a very easy cause for closeted white supremacists to hide behind because one of the main tenets of white supremacy is the right to comfort. Many climate activists under this lens are seeking their own comfort rather than genuine, equitable environmental justice for all groups of people. And I think it's about time to confront these realities, demand an end to the complicity in these oppressive structures, and redefine what true climate activism should look like. Our fight for the environment must be inclusive, and I don't mean surface level inclusive. Hey y'all, so I want to talk about something I've been observing, especially in the context of the Congo. And I've actually coined a term and made up my own term for it because I've seen it happening so much in everyday life, and so much it's just a constant phenomenon, especially now in light of what's happening in the Congo and in light of what's happening in Palestine. Now, what I'm about to talk about is very different from the traditional environmental racism that we all know and we all see every day. With that being said, I want to talk about eco-egocentrism. Now, eco-egocentrism is my way of describing a specific trend in environmental activism, and it's very different, like I mentioned, very different from environmental racism, although it's not too different. I would say it's probably more of a subcategory of environmental racism because it comes with its own little phenomenon. Now, eco-egocentrism is essentially actions that appear on the surface to be for climate preservation, but are actually motivated by protecting one's own comfort, wealth, and lifestyle. And this philosophy often hides racial and economic biases that tend to favor the interests of the wealthy, white, predominantly white communities. And it also tends to ignore the environmental and the human costs that fall on marginalized groups. So in essence, eco-egocentrism reflects neo-colonial attitudes within the environmental movement, where the green agenda is hijacked, if it ever were to be owned by us, but let's use the word hijacked, to benefit the elite. And it's just yet another institution that further deepens global inequalities under the facade of environmental care. And what's happening in the Congo is a direct example of this at play. So before I get into how we're seeing this in the Congo, I just want to explain what this is a little bit more. So eco-egocentrism is essentially just my way of describing a philosophy where environmental actions, ostensibly under the banner of climate activism, fundamentally motivated by the protection and preservation of one's own comfort, wealth, and way of life. And it's a facade, it's a mask that masks deep-seated racial and economic biases, prioritizing the well-being of the affluent, white, heteronormative societies while disregarding the environmental and human costs borne by everyone else. Eco-egocentrism is a reflection of neo-colonial attitudes in environmentalism, and it's where the green movement is co-opted to serve the interests of the privileged, and it perpetuates years of systemic global inequalities under the guise and under the facade, again, of environmental stewardship. So let's bring this to the Congo. For those who are not aware, the Congo is facing a genocide, and it's not just the warring factions who have a hand to play in it, but it is Western tech giants and imperialist powers are also complicit in this atrocity. So nearly 7 million people are displaced, not by chance, but by systemic, violent scramble for minerals like cobalt and coltan. Now, what most of us are coming to know now, and we didn't know, we were in the dark before, is that those two minerals, cobalt and coltan, they are the lifeblood of the green technology revolution. It's essential for electric cars, for solar panels, and it is sourced from the blood-soaked soils of the Congo. So let's be clear, this is not just a humanitarian crisis, this is a deliberate stripping away of human rights, and it's a genocide for the sake of a green revolution. And Congolese communities are being trampled under the boots of multinational corporations and their military accomplices. Congolese people are being forced from their homes. Their settlements are being burned to the ground to make way for mines. This is neocolonialism in the most brutal form. And Western companies are essentially in a corrupt dance with the Congolese elite to continue a legacy of exploitation that echoes the darkest days of colonialism. And I wouldn't even say echoes, we are in the dark days of colonialism. Now, how this relates back to eco-egocentrism. So Elon Musk and Tesla are monopolizing the Congo's cobalt, and they are not just securing their supply chain, they are actively reinforcing a system that thrives on violence and exploitation. The green technology industry, which is masquerading as the savior and white knight from the climate crisis, the green technology industry that is masquerading as a savior and a white knight for the climate crisis is perpetuating a cycle of colonial violence. And it is time for us to confront these giants, demand that they end their complicity in this genocide, and radically transform how we source materials for our own sustainable future. I want you guys to consider the Democratic Republic of Congo. A record nearly 7 million people have been displaced due to this genocide that's taking place, and is one of the largest internal displacements and humanitarian crisis in the world right now, aside from the genocide that is taking place in Palestine. This is a clear example of the devastating human cost that is often ignored by those who practice eco-egocentrism. And the green technology industry, which masquerades as a savior or a white knight for the climate crisis, is the leader, the fish whose head is rotting from the top down. Another example of who I want to look at is Greta Thunberg, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her last name. I love Greta so much. When Greta stood in solidarity with Palestine, she faced incredible backlash from these environmental activists, to the point where I can't recall what the name of her organization is right now, Something Friday. They dropped her from the organization as the face of the environmental movement because she spoke up against genocide and said that they did not want to conflate politics. Again, they used the word politics. They didn't want to conflate that with environmentalism. I want that to sink in. I just want you guys to repeat that phrase over in your head again, because this is the core of egocentrism. That exact reaction exposes how many in the climate justice community, despite their claims, are influenced by racial biases and, again, perpetuate environmental racism. So the moment that Greta aligned with a cause outside of the mainstream, safe climate narrative, she was turned on by many who previously supported her. And I think that's a good example of egocentrism, because it often thrives and manifests as a not in my backyard approach. It's inherently about owning the world. It's about ensuring that their own environment remains untouched, while being completely indifferent to the pollution and destruction of the world everywhere else. Again, the not in my backyard. This mindset prioritizes saving ice caps, let's use ice caps, for the sake of their own descendants, disregarding the immediate suffering of marginalized populations. Climate justice is a very easy cause for closeted white supremacists to hide behind, because one of the main tenets of white supremacy is the right to comfort. Many climate activists under this lens are seeking their own comfort, rather than genuine, equitable environmental justice for all groups of people. And I think it's about time to confront these realities, demand an end to the complicity in these oppressive structures, and redefine what true climate activism should look like. Our fight for the environment must be inclusive, and I don't mean surface level inclusive. It's time to acknowledge and actively work against the deep-seated prejudices that have long influenced this movement and are pretty much ingrained in the fabrics of this movement.